Good morning. So we are still in a new episode. We have Mr. François Alfonsi from the European Parliament. He was a maths and physics professor, and he had a very active role in politics for many years. So in 2009, at the European elections, he was elected, and he was re-elected at the European elections and at the Green Party. And he is also chairing the group of minorities. We'll talk today about the minorities. So I would like to thank you, first of all, for accepting the invitation. So we always stand by you. So first of all, I'd like to ask about the evaluation of the national minorities in Europe. How would you evaluate the current situation in which 1 out of 7 European citizens belongs in minorities? So I'd say that there is a minority. There are minorities from the treaty after the war, but in this particular situation, this minority, I think that the situation is quite good, as opposed to the situation of other minorities, where many. So this is the current situation, and over the 30 years, for 30 last years, there has been a shift of the theme of the human rights and minority rights. And I think that there has in the 90s, many important documents were signed at a European level. Also, the treaty, well, all these documents, the Lisbon criteria, also with a charter regarding the adhesion, which requires from the European member states and the new member states that join the European Union to respect the rights of their minorities. And there has been quite important developments, and currently the member states have the green light from the European Union to ensure that anything that is anyone who is not part of the dominating citizens, all the citizens who are part of the minorities. There is a small decay compared to 30 years ago. Yes, and I agree. And as you said, there are many documents that prove it. And what do you think that we should do in order to protect the national minorities? I think that we need to convey a message to the European authorities that if, for example, we rely on the Greek government to resolve the problem in favor of the Turkish minority, this will never happen, because if there are still difficulties, it's what is important to convey as a message that this is an eternal matter of the governments. And of course, we need to make sure that the competent authorities have the possibility to resolve them. And I think that the European Commission uh, cannot just stay out of what is happening in the European countries, and because it has many territories with minorities. So I think that the European Parliament, we are very active in order to raise awareness of this message. And the second thing is that the future of Europe, in the future of Europe, the question of the minorities is very critical. In the Balkans, for example, and elsewhere. And of course, we cannot ensure an harmonic expansion without renewing, without reviewing the documents in favor of the minorities. So this political awareness, but because of course all these are important for the future of Europe. So this territorial unity at the European level, since from Croatia to Greece, of course, we need to ensure that, and in order to do that, we need to go back to the fundamentals of the Copenhagen criteria and the fundamentals of the documents that need to be reviewed at a European level. So yes, you were the first deputy who visited our region in 2012. So you remember this region. So what is the evaluation with regard to the Turkish community in Thrace? Well, since 2012, back then there was a financial crisis in Greece, and there was a tension that, of course, affected the political situation in Greece. And of course, there were some wildfires also. And all of these had significant consequences that were widely felt. And of course, this was a tension, which of course is a bit better today, but of course it caused in Greece and in Europe a situation which didn't exist 10 years ago. There have been territorial and maritime conflicts, and the question, of course, of Cyprus, which still pending. All these, of course, do have consequences. And of course, in this context, the national priority of Greece makes it act in a way that makes it difficult to deal with the minorities. And of course, the Greek citizens must be very well aware of the situation, and of course the importance of the minority. If Europe comes back and reviews the documents with regard to the minorities, I think that the solution will come faster. So as regards the education currently, the kindergartens in Thrace are not authorized, and you raised a question on behalf of the European Parliament. So what is your comment on this question? Yes, clearly this is an issue. Yes, we must. Of course, this should not be left at the national education of Greece. The immersive schools, of course, the education has evolved, and the children now join the school system very early, whether it's kindergarten, etc. So this is a fundamental issue because they start learning the language, and than in the kindergartens. The immersion is the best way to guarantee the perennity of the Turkish culture and, of course, the daily uh, practice of the Turkish language by those who then end up being bilingual as the years go by. So the best way of the respect and the integration is this. And and we can maintain a minority in the European project or in a national project only if it is its history and culture and language are recognized. So this is very important, and there must be a political will, which is the adequate one. But behind this, there is a project, a real project of the elimination of the Turkish minority, which loses its the feeling of beginning and of so this is something that exists, and there are many difficulties with respect to this. And France and Greece are cousins, and they act based on the same fundamentals, and it's difficult to have to recognize, for example, the Corsican language and to respect the identity, the cultural and historical identity. But of course, Europe can help, and there are many countries where this issue has been solved. In Switzerland, for example, there are 4 official languages that are spoken, and the people live together since many centuries. Yes, you touched upon a very important issue with regard to the cultural and educational right. And as you know, there has been a question of autonomy of the Turkish community. What can we do to resolve this autonomy issue and ensure access to education? Education is not a European competence. The equivalence of the diplomas and the degrees is, and which allows through the Erasmus project to students to move from one country to the other. But so this is a competence of the state, and there are examples. If you go, for example, in South Italy, there is in northern Italy, there is a state where an area where people speak German, and its rights are respected, and the decision makers of Bolzano have really taken into account a minority that lives on their territory. And this minority has been classified recently as one of the only, the rare minorities whose situation improves as regards their rights, their language, the respect of their language, etc. So there are some good examples in Europe, and this must become a European standard. And of course, it's the European Parliament that can do that better than the Greek or the French parliaments alone, because Greece has gone through a dictatorship of the 7-year period in which the democracy was in danger. But Europe has interests, and the interest of Europe is to make sure that all the citizens are recognized as Europeans, and in order to be considered as Europeans, their identity must be recognized. And it's not a political issue for Europe to recognize somebody's identity, whatever this identity is, whether it's South Andalusia, etc. So the diversity is Europe. And of course, first of all, this diversity question must be conveyed to all the member states. And of course, if there is a minority that has a problems in one specific country, it's the specific country's problem. And we should not forget, we should not say that that's an internal competence. And if you see, for example, in Hungary, the respect of the fundamental rights is a European right, and it must be imposed. So the respect of the minorities must be imposed to the member states. Yes, Greece, just like France, are among the countries that do not recognize the identities of their minorities. So, what do you think that Greece is afraid of? When something like this happens, is it that it has a problems, its own or problems. Both Greece and France have suffered, let's say, in the past, and today Europe represents a continent whose political unity has been conquered. Europe has many competencies and interferes in the life of its citizens. So the member states feel that this European identity is like it's like that Europe makes them abandon their competencies. And many times the citizens are, for example, if some people have a very strong ideology, like, for example, Greece and France, it takes a long time for them to accept. For example, the national education in Germany is not managed in the capital, but from each region, London. But I think that in Greece, and just like in France, is the central state that has the competence for the education. So, but however, the minorities suffer from this attitude, and they end up having many difficulties. And Greece has some difficulties with regard to the economy, to the environment. So it should find another way and to be inspired from another way of governance with regard to the minorities. So, as a last message that you would like to convey to the Greek authorities, the only message that I want is that the future is Europe, and Europe is diversity, and the Greek history must put forward and not refuse the minorities. So, by the respect of the minorities, we will be able to build the European construction, which is, of course, is the future. Thank you very much for being our guest, and thank you for answering to all these questions. Very shortly, we will have a new episode, and thank you all for participating.